Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Just want to call this meeting of Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment to order. Today, I just want to acknowledge, as we do in all of our respective hearings, our committee members. We have Senator George Edwards, which is the veteran of our respective committee. We have Senator Jackson, and we have Senator Johnny Ray Sailing. We will hear from 4 respective agencies today. We'll hear from the Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services. We'll hear from our Comptroller of Maryland. We'll hear from the newly Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. We'll also hear from MDOT SHA. I'm going to call up first our folks from Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. Mr. Morgan Smith. Oh, Ms. Morgan Smith.
Good afternoon. I'm Morgan Smith, and I'll be presenting the operating budget analysis for the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission today. On page 1, you'll see the operating budget summary for ATC, and in fiscal 2023, the budget increases $1.5 million, or 38.2%, to $5.3 million. Jumping to page 2, we'll talk briefly about the proposed efficiency for fiscal 22. This proposed efficiency totals $123,928, and it's going to be used for various items. In particular, there should be $67,250 for contractual services, which include the destruction of alcohol and tobacco products. Part of the deficiency also covers the transfer of vehicles from the Comptroller's Office to the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. Exhibit 1, also on page 2, highlights the overview of agency spending. Of their proposed $5.3 million allowance, 81% is used for personnel. There's an additional 7% for motor vehicles, another 7% for supplies and equipment, and the last 5% is made up of other expenses, contractual services, and communication. There's not a lot to talk about the proposed budget change, but I will point out the biggest change here is $531,000 for the new personnel costs for 8 additional positions that I'll talk about in a moment. On page 4, the personnel data is outlined for you. The Alcohol and Tobacco Commission saw an increase of 8 positions over fiscal 2022 to 2023, and of these positions, 7 were for sworn law enforcement agents, and 1 was a non-sworn administrator. The agent positions will be assigned to the Field Operations Bureau of the Field Enforcement Division, and the administrator position will be assigned to the Regulatory and Administrative Services Bureau. We have one item to talk about today, and that's the amount of retail inspections. Let me scroll for this graph. And that is on page 5 of the PDF. As you may already know, the ATC was created in 2019 and authorized to begin enforcing alcohol and tobacco laws in 2021 after the field enforcement was transferred to the from the Comptroller's Office to ATC. The ATC has a goal of deterring the possession and sales of illegal tobacco and alcohol products through inspections. And in 2021, ATC inspected 58% of all tobacco retail establishments and 27% of all alcohol retail establishments. This is significantly higher than their goal of 15% and 9% of tobacco and alcohol product retailers, respectively. And our recommended action is to concur with the governor's allowance. With that, this concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And seeing no questions, we'll walk right into the agency's report. I do see Chairman Silverstein, and I also see Director Kelly. Please.
Chairman, my mic is on, okay. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today on behalf of the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. The Alcohol and Tobacco Commission is charged with conducting various studies, issuing reports, and evaluating some alcohol product labeling. Its approach has been to foster understanding of the alcohol and tobacco industries and their effect on public health, the economy, and the greater community. This understanding is strengthened by having inclusive discussions with regulators, Department of Health, and health advocates, industry associates, and members of the interested public. The governor's allowance and Ms. Smith's analysis and recommendation would further the work of ATC to become the impactful educational, regulatory, and enforcement agency it's meant to be. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair McCray and members of the Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee. My name is Jeff Kelly. I am the Executive Director of the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission, which I'll refer to as the ATC. I've submitted written testimony. I'll keep my remarks brief. And I'd just like to briefly introduce, if I may, a couple of gentlemen who are with me. Mr. Bill George is the Director of our Field Enforcement Division, and Mr. Thomas Akris is the Director of our Legal and Legislative Division, which are the two big subcomponents of the ATC and the Office of the Executive Director. And if there's opportunity, perhaps at the end, they could just introduce themselves. First and foremost, thanks for the opportunity to address you and any concerns that you might have with our FY23 budget. And secondly, I really want to thank Ms. Morgan Smith for her thoughtful and very transparent analysis. This was my first time of being responsible entirely for a budget, and she kind of walked me through it, which I appreciate, and I felt very much like a partner and like I was part of this process. Instead of something happening to us, it was happening with us, and I'm grateful for that, so thank you. The ATC was created in 2019, in the 2019 session of the Maryland General Assembly, which was to become effective in July 2020, enter COVID-19. General Assembly understood that standing up an organization was a little bit of a tall order, especially under the auspices of COVID-19, and through Senate Bill 911 in 2020, delayed the startup until January 1st, 2021. That was mid-fiscal year. What was significant about that was that the ATC did not have an opportunity, understandably, to participate in any of the budget process, any of the allocation or request or subsequent appropriation. But this year we're getting that chance. In creating the ATC, the General Assembly directed that the Comptroller move 27 positions from his then Field Enforcement Division and transfer them from the Office of the Comptroller to the ATC. What that meant from our actual in-the-field, on-the-road operation was we went from about 18 field agents down to 8 agents to cover the entire state, to cover around 5,500 tobacco retailers and over 9,100 alcohol retailers, which is very few people to cover a lot of entities. It's just not enough. Just to give you a quick example, recently we had 2 operations scheduled for the same night in 2 different jurisdictions in the state. That took all of our agents. It's not a big problem. We were able to cover that, but it took all of our agents to go to 2 different locations. The net result of that is if we get one more call for assistance or service, we can't respond. We won't have anybody. And these aren't, this is not uncommon for us to get involved in these. And we can't do these operations really without the help of our local partners of Departments of Health and local law enforcement as well. And that means also, think about the geography of Maryland with only 8 agents. To do an operation, in this case, Montgomery County and Baltimore County, I've got to bring agents from as far away as Garrett County and Worcester County, north and south, everywhere in between, all to just address the needs of these 2 cases. And the difficulty is it's just not sustainable. Good news is that the governor's allowance provides us for 7 new equipped agents and a new administrator to help work on all the mandates of the ATC, as Chairman Silverstein had mentioned. And I guess I want to take a personal moment here just to say, we're your ATC. The General Assembly created us. I'm really proud to be a part of it. I work with some terrific men and women. We want this to work. We want to be effective. We want to do everything you wanted us to do, everything you envisioned that we would be when you created us. We want to be that and more. We want to come back next year with a record and show you some things we've done and hopefully have knocked your socks off of what we're able to accomplish. And this additional staffing will go a long way in helping us do that. So I urge you to support our budget request and the allowance from the governor, and I appreciate it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yep. And seeing no questions, Senator Salem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I see with the other 7 officers that you just had to appoint and 1 administrator, and it seemed like you were saying you didn't have enough. I think more than anything, we know how important it is that you have the proper number to do your job.
I appreciate it.
And we know right now, in a lot of our departments, we have a major problem with hiring. And so just knowing that and trying to work with other departments to see how we can do that, I think we would like to know if that's enough I mean, at times, you think it's enough, but it's not sometimes. And I'm not saying that, hey, do we need 20? I'm just saying, if this is enough to do your job and do it properly, do it the right way, administrate the right way. And if we could help out any way, we would love to do that. I want to help out our departments in this state to do the best and be the best. And the only way we're going to do that is we know we need to hire. And it's been very hard. But if we can assist in any way, we would love to be there for you. And I'm going to thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And seeing no further questions, I think just on behalf of the committee, I think that we all just to compliment Senator Saling's words, just want to congratulate you on your ascension, Director Kelly, Mr. Chair, and we all want to work in concert with you all and making sure that this is productive as possible. And just congratulations to your men out there, your team. Ms. Smith, just thank you for your due diligence, dedication, and commitment. This ends the hearing for Alcohol and Tobacco Commission, ATC, and we're going to move on to Comptroller Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I wait or should I keep going? Okay.
He's in room.
I'm Morgan Smith, again, for the record, and I will be presenting the analysis on, oh, I don't even have the comptroller up. Hold on one second. It is not the right analysis. Let's find it. Okay, now we're in the right place. Here's the analysis for the comptroller's office. You'll see on page 1 the operating budget summary for fiscal 23. The comptroller's fiscal 23 budget decreases by $14.8 million, or 8.5%, to $158.9 million in fiscal 23. And you'll notice that in fiscal 21, the actual reflects $218 million in federal stimulus funds that were not provided in other fiscal years. We'll hop over to page 4. You'll see Exhibit 1. This highlights the personal income tax returns that were received and processed by the Comptroller's Office over the last 5 fiscal years. The Comptroller aims to process electronic returns within 4 days of receipt and paper copies within 22 days of receipt. You'll notice that between fiscal 2020 and 2021, there was an increase of 40,000 electronic returns, but the percent reviewed timely declined from 93% to 87%. This is directly related to the pandemic, as resources were not available, primarily due to COVID-19 related absences. On page 5, you'll see Exhibit 2, which walks through the dollars collected on unpaid taxes between fiscal 2017 and fiscal 2021. In 2021, the Comptroller collected $262.6 million in unpaid income taxes and $172.8 million in delinquent business taxes. This is a substantial decline from the year prior, when $401.2 million and $225.1 million in unpaid income and business taxes were collected respectively. This difference is due primarily to the suspension of tax collection activities implemented in March 2020 due to the pandemic. Moving on to page 6, you'll see Exhibit 3. And this graph shows you the unclaimed property reported and repaid by the Comptroller's Office. And this is, again, between fiscal 2017 and 2021. The Comptroller is responsible for holding and attempting to reunite lost or unclaimed property with its rightful owner. Unclaimed property reported to the Comptroller increased from $186.6 million in fiscal 2020 to $246.7 million in fiscal 2021. You'll note that fiscal 2020 to 2021, the amount of unclaimed property paid to the rightful owner is increasing by $4.9 million. On page 7, there's a discussion of the fiscal 2021 federal stimulus funds. Most notably, I want to point out the $177.8 million in federal funds from the Coronavirus Relief Fund to support direct stimulus payments to qualifying Marylanders, and the $32 million allocated through the Relief Act. There's also discussion further down on the page, beginning the synopsis of the agency's spending. And this is shown also in Exhibit 4 in the form of a pie chart. You'll see that personnel takes up 60% of the comptroller's budget in fiscal 2023 at $95.4 million. And the next biggest chunk is contractual services, which takes up 31%. These contractual services items are related to the Annapolis Data Center as well as other IT contracts. And specifically, these IT contracts relate to the 2 major IT development projects for the Comptroller's Office. You'll see, starting on page 8 and 9, the proposed budget changes for the Comptroller's Office, and I just want to point out there is a subheading for the major IT development projects on page 9, and you'll see that cost for the new payroll system, which I'll discuss a little bit later, is $2 million, but that is mostly outweighed by other costs for the IT project. For personnel, this is on PDF page 11. The Comptroller had 147 vacant positions at the end of calendar 2021, which is about 13.57% of total positions. And these were specifically within the compliance, revenue, and IT divisions. The Comptroller also saw 15 contractual full-time equivalents being added between the Working 22 appropriation and the 23 allowance, and these were primarily for the revenue administration to provide flexibility in the length of employment. Previously, they were using temporary positions for tax season, but as tax season was extended, temporary positions aren't allowed to work more than 6 months. So this allows for flexibility within their contractual positions. You'll also note that in fiscal 23, the allowance abolished 7 positions. This was a net of 6 full-time and 2 part-time positions spread out across compliance, revenue, the Annapolis Data Center, and IT services. And there's just one issue to talk about today, and this is introducing the new major IT project that the Comptroller has. They would like to modernize the Central Payroll Bureau's payroll and financial management systems. Currently, the payroll system is a legacy mainframe system, so it's quite old, and it has insufficient security systems and inadequate staff with proper training to continue to operate it. The Central Payroll Bureau would like to update to a cloud-based software, and this project would also include the replacement of the financial management system, which you may already know is the official accounting system of record for the state. The budget books show only $11 million for this project so far, and of which $7 million occurs in 2023. It is not clear what the full cost of the project is planned to be. So DLS is asking the Comptroller to discuss the anticipated timeframe for completing these system replacements, and we recommend adopting committee narrative requesting a report on this project as well as the ongoing integrated tax system project. And you'll see that is the one recommended action that we have. And before I go, I just want to point out that there are 5 appendices, 1 for the JCRs from last year, 2 audits, and then 2 appendices walking you through each of the IT projects. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you again, Ms. Smith, and seeing no questions, Deputy Comptroller, I do see the Deputy Comptroller there, and the Comptroller's en route, right, Justin? Okay.
Right on time.
And magically he appears. And I do also see Director Krzyjak out in the audience too. Mr. Comptroller, we've heard your agency report, and this is that moment where we get to hear the response from yourself.
Thank you. So I'd like to abbreviate my oral testimony. My written testimony has been submitted for the record. Deputy Comptroller Andy Schaffel, a fabulous acquisition or promotion for me. Thank you, Andy, for your seamless leadership, and really appreciate it. We miss Sharon Bernardi quite a bit. I want to acknowledge, in addition to Andy, that we have Justin Hayes, Dennis Krzyzak, David Hildebrand with us. And they represent the exceptional work of our outstanding staff, especially during this incredibly strenuous challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. Like most agencies and employers, the Comptroller's Office experienced a plethora of challenges relating to the pandemic. Nonetheless, like everyone else in state government, the 1,100 dedicated men and women who comprise the most effective and efficient tax agency in the country rose to the challenge and remain committed to providing taxpayers with respect the taxpayer, respond to the taxpayer, get results for the taxpayer over and over again. Last year, the passage of the Relief Act and the delayed start to the 2020 tax filing season added another set of hurdles for this agency during its busiest time, right at the beginning of the tax season. When the Relief Act became law on February 15th, 2021, I pledged to get stimulus checks and funds quickly into the hands of more than 422,000 eligible Marylanders. 4 days after the bill was signed by the governor, one of the 4 days was a snow day. On February 19th, thanks to the hard work and planning of this agency, 98% of all these 422,000 payments were processed and out to people who were struggling through no fault of their own. Specifically, that meant 246,751 electronic payments with a value of $105.1 million transmitted to banks for deposit into individuals' accounts, and 186,878 paper checks totaling $77.3 million were processed in 3 business days by the Comptroller's Office. Additionally, as directed in the Relief Act, the Comptroller's Office processed more than 40,000 checks to Marylanders caught in the unfortunate, unnecessary unemployment insurance backlog, and we did so within 48 hours of receiving the payee list from the Department of Labor. It was a tremendous effort by our staff, who diligently prepared for weeks to get almost all Relief Act funds quickly distributed to Marylanders who needed it the most. This is once again in the busiest part of our start of the season. In addition to that important task, we did not miss a beat accepting state tax returns, getting refunds out the door in a matter of days. We continue to be sensitive to Marylanders who are suffering due to the pandemic's economic impact on the state of Maryland. As you may recall, late in 2020, the Comptroller's General Accounting Division played a vital role in assisting nearly 4,000 child care providers, small, mostly minority and women-owned for-profit businesses. They had been left waiting for over a month for grant dollars that were promised but not delivered to providers caring for the children of essential workers, leaving some of these vital businesses on the verge of closure. We lost about 1,000 of them. Our experts assisted the Maryland State Department of Education with their role in the process, and once the payment request reached the General Accounting Division, the Comptroller's Office processed direct deposits and checks within hours to help keep these child care centers in business at a critical time. In January, utilizing authority granted to me, I extended the 2022 Maryland income tax filing and payment deadline to July 15th, 2022. This was the 3rd consecutive year in which my agency has extended the tax filing and payment deadline in order to help tens of thousands of fellow Marylanders and tens of thousands of small businesses. Over 600,000 Marylanders each year continue to feel the financial impact from this pandemic. The extensions have allowed taxpayers who are struggling to use that money towards immediate issues like paying rent or keeping their business open. Previous extended due dates have helped approximately 600,000 taxpayers and have allowed them to hold on to up to average $1 billion plus as an interest-free, penalty-free loan from the state of Maryland. This budget reflects our shared desire to find even more ways to further build upon our successes as an agency in the most fiscally prudent way. Over the last 3 fiscal years, we've placed a strong emphasis on strengthening our taxpayer services operations. We've already established an independent, standalone taxpayer services division, which has better synchronized our efforts to address taxpayer needs across our agency. I'm especially proud that thanks to our investment in our call center operations, the average wait time generally has been 1 minute. I call it every day, the 800 MD taxes number. Sometimes I'm happy if it's 3 or 4 minutes, frankly. Despite the pandemic, we still assisted 22,335 taxpayers in our branch offices across the state, of which 423 were virtual appointments designed to assist taxpayers did not want to visit our offices in person. In addition, our 12 regional branch offices prepared and filed 1,589 Maryland state tax returns free of charge for our taxpayers, processed more than 12,414 payments, and collected over $97,862,000 in payments. In today's digital age, my office continues to emphasize the convenience of our free, secure electronic filing system. I'm proud that more than 2.8 million Marylanders utilized this service in tax year 2020. That represents 88% of all income tax returns, which is another historic high for the state. In addition, 95% of Marylanders who filed their returns electronically last year had their returns, refunds processed, refunds issued within 4 days. And as I've proudly noted to this committee and to taxpayers across the state, over 90% of Maryland taxpayers have their returns processed within 3 business days. What's more, the average number of days for electronic filers receiving their refunds, this is electronic filers, Secretary Ports often complains. I tell him sometimes his return gets put aside for fraud detection. It's a joke. I'm trying to keep that down on the down low, but because he complained he didn't get his refund within 2.5 business days when I was talking about this. In calendar year 2021, our agency processed more than approximately 3.3 million tax returns, processed more than $3.1 billion in tax refunds. As the state's chief fiscal officer, my agency continues to work diligently to ensure that all citizens, businesses, and companies are paying their fair share of taxes. By consistently implementing new and innovative and aggressive strategies, our compliance division has collected $8.2 billion in delinquent taxes over the last 14 years. I stress that these are not new taxes. Rather, they are taxes lawfully owed to the state. In the Comptroller's office, tax fairness is not an abstract concept, it's a driving principle. Another crucial service that complements excellent customer service is working relentlessly to protect taxpayers' hard-earned money from financial criminals. Since I took office in 2007, we've intercepted and blocked more than 140,000 fraudulent returns, prevented the disbursement of more than $260 million in fraudulent refunds. A significant component of our fraud protection involves identifying and halting fraudulent tax preparers. The Comptroller's Office prides itself on maintaining a state-of-the-art fraud detection model that can identify suspicious returns regardless of how sophisticated the criminals become. Since 2016, my agency has blocked 236 Maryland tax preparers at 250 locations. After the General Assembly's overwhelmingly bipartisan, unanimous passage of the Taxpayer Protection Act of 2017, the Field Enforcement Bureau has used every tool at their disposal to not only quickly investigate these fraudulent actors, but also block them from victimizing other innocent Maryland taxpayers. I'm extremely proud of the critical work that the Field Enforcement Bureau, the Questionable Returns Division team, and all our employees who play a role in safeguarding Marylanders' financial security and combating the national epidemic of tax fraud and identity theft. As you may recall, the Field Enforcement Bureau was renamed from the Field Enforcement Division, which previously handled all the above matters as well as alcohol and tobacco regulatory affairs. Happy to report that in our mission to maximize both customer service and taxpayer protection, we're making tremendous progress. and we're on schedule and on budget with our transition into Compass, a new state-of-the-art tax processing system that replaces our current 25-year-old SMART system that is costly, inefficient, and obsolete. Compass is already and will continue to improve our internal systems and processes that will strengthen our core agency operations and bolster our ability to deliver exceptional taxpayer service. This major and critically important overhaul of our tax system would not be possible without the consistent support of Governors O'Malley and Hogan, Treasurers Kopp and Davis, and the Board of Public Works. Transitioning our new integrated tax system is a very important achievement to me and to my leadership team, because this money belongs to the taxpayers of Maryland, and it's crucial that we value their tax filing experience and what their money does for this state and its economy. Sincerely grateful again to Deputy Comptroller Andy Schoffel, who is leading the agency's efforts. As the agency that will be charged with ensuring proper taxation and compliance of cannabis sales, the Office of the Comptroller stands ready, is committed to working with the General Assembly to create a strong, sound, and fair taxation and regulatory framework. It's our sincere hope that the General Assembly will give careful consideration to the feedback and suggestions provided by a team of experts assembled within the Comptroller's office, as the creation of a cannabis tax will impact ongoing and future agency operations, particularly for the Compass project. Given that various legislative proposals for cannabis legalization all anticipate a start date ranging from now until spring of 2024 for retail sales, it's imperative the legislature begin appropriating funding to ramp up the taxation and compliance apparatus in this fiscal year to allow for the necessary staffing and programming upgrades to incur in time. Gratitude, I respectfully ask for your support of the Comptroller Maryland's fiscal year 2023 budget request in order to continue the successful work we've undertaken together on behalf of Maryland taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Seeing no questions, Mr. Comptroller, just wanted to end by saying on behalf of the entire subcommittee, you know, the Comptroller's office has been one of the most responsive, one of the most producing agencies that we have, and just wanted to say thank you for your leadership in reference to our Comptroller's office during your tenure. I know it's been a great opportunity to be able to work with you, and I say that on behalf of the respective committee. I think that you would also say, and you said this in your opening remarks, that, you know, you lifted up the team of folks that's over at the Comptroller's office, and we all know that things do not get done with the team, but just wanted to applaud your leadership, because that's where it kind of starts at, and the team looks at for the leader. So thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you.
Colleagues, this ends the hearing for the Comptroller of Maryland. Ms. Smith, just thank you again for your detailed commitment and due diligence in reference to the agency's report. And at this moment, I'd like to call up Ms. Madeline Miller to give us the report off of the Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Madeline. Today I'll be presenting the operating budget analysis for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services. In fiscal 2023, the budget increases by $76.2 million, or 30.3%, to $328 million, largely due to the addition of funding for general and special fund grants. My presentation begins with some of the office's performance analysis, as Gcpyvs is the state's primary agency for public safety resources. Crime metrics are included in its Managing for Results data. Exhibit 1 on page 4 shows select crime metrics in Maryland between calendar 2014 and 2020. The 2020 figures reflect the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Both the number of homicide victims and the number of non-fatal shooting victims increased between 2018 and 2019, and then in 2020 by 5.3% and 9.2% respectively. I'll also take a minute to speak about out-of-home placement reports. Gcpyvs is one of the primary agencies that oversees the welfare of children placed out of the home. The number of out-of-home placements for fiscal 2011 through 2020 is presented in Exhibit 2.
while the number was 4.4 in fiscal 2020, a 43.6% decrease from the prior year. Out-of-home placements rose in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Efforts taken to reduce youth out-of-home placements in connection to the COVID-19 pandemic are likely the source of the decline. Further insight into the state's out-of-home placement trends will be presented to the Budget Committees in a release of funds letter. DLS recommends that the Budget Committees add a section to the budget bill restricting funds in Gcpyvs, the Department of Human Services, the Department of Juvenile Services, the Developmental Disabilities Administration, and the Maryland State Department of Education, pending the submission of a 2022 out-of-home placements report. Moving now to my discussion of the previous budgets, the agency received federal stimulus funds in fiscal 2011 and, in 2021 and 2022. In 2021, GCPYBS received $1.3 million in CARES Act funds for coronavirus emergency supplemental funding and approximately $400,000 for family violence prevention and services grants. The agency received $1.7 million for this purpose, the Family Violence Prevention and Services grants, in fiscal 2022 between CARES Act and American Rescue Plan Act funds, and another about $530,000 in ARPA funds in fiscal 23. In fiscal 22, ARPA funds are also used to support the Victim Services Unit, the Children and Youth Division, and the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network. An overview of the agency spending is shown in Exhibit 3 on page 7. Over 55% of the allowance is appropriated for various local law enforcement grants, including the annual allocation of the formula-based State Aid for Police Protection Fund. These programs total $182.1 million of the total fiscal 2023 allowance, with approximately $122.5 million allocated to SAPP or SAP grants. The administrative headquarters receives over $90 million, or 28% of the budget, and the Children's Cabinet Interagency Fund receives the next largest portion at $26 million, or 8%. Spending for the remaining portions makes up the remaining 9% of the budget. The change in the allowance is detailed on Exhibit 4. General and special fund grant expenditures drive most of the $76.2 million growth. There's a $75.2 million net increase in general fund grants, a $12.3 million net increase in special fund grants, a net decrease of $1.1 million in federal fund grants, and a net decrease of $10.3 million in reimbursable fund grants. I'd like to point out that funding for the agency also grows with the addition of 10 positions, which will support the implementation of Chapter 20 of 2021, the Public Resources Organizing to End Crime Together, or PROTECT program. These positions are for fulfilling new responsibilities that the agency has rather than to help manage existing workloads. The budget grows about $54 million as well in connection with the administration's Refund the Police initiative further down on this page, and another 4.6 for the restoration of funding for the Violence Intervention and Prevention program. The chart is continued on to page 10. Many of the federal fund grants grow by about $45,000 as noted. The office reports that this is a projection of federal formula allocations to Maryland from the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level. Additionally, the office will not be providing funding to MSDE to support Project Bounce Back, a series of initiatives to address adverse childhood experiences and assist children, youth, and families recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in fiscal 2023. Jumping ahead in my presentation to page 15, Exhibit 8 shows the various state partners in funding for the project. DLS asked that GCPYVS comment on the status of the Project Bounce Back initiative and the extent to which the programming and fiscal resources carry forward into fiscal 23. Further detail about changes to state grants and federal grants can be found in appendices 2 and 3 of the analysis document. Now jumping back in time in my document, on page 11, general fund grant expenditures grow in the allowance in connection to the Refund the Police initiative as detailed in Exhibit 5. This initiative seeks to increase funding for law enforcement and for crime control and victim protection services by about $500 million across fiscal 2022 through 2025. The estimated impact to the GCPYVS operating budget across all years is nearly $200 million between general and federal funds, though that figure includes some funds that will be provided directly to other state agencies instead of through reimbursable funds from GCPYVS. The office will receive almost $60 million in general funds in fiscal '23, including $8 million for a Police Accountability Resources Fund, as required by Chapter 59 of 2021, the Maryland Police Accountability Act. Funding for victim service providers and state-operated victim services programs totals $37.3 million across the 4 years, with $25.6 million allocated in the fiscal '23 budget plan. Voca funding, including the use of $19.8 million in federal ARPA funds for victim service providers, is discussed in greater detail in the issues section of this analysis. Most of the enhanced funding under the Refund the Police initiative is for state aid for police protection funding. Sap funds would provide support to local and county police agency operations. This initiative would add $975 to each county's general fund award per sworn officer and $6.46 per county resident. The existing funding and formula growth and the growth from this enhancement are detailed in Exhibit 6. Baltimore City, which does not receive formula-based SAP funds in exchange for the state operating the Baltimore City Detention Center, would receive a flat $8 million grant in fiscal '23. According to the administration, the purpose of the initiative is to provide needed support and resources to state and local police agencies in their efforts to fight violent crime. The enhanced SAP funding does not appear to target additional resources to the areas in the state experiencing the highest crime rates, however, as explored in Exhibit 7. The legislature may wish to consider restructuring the enhanced portion of the SAP funding to target areas of the state with higher violent crime, or alternatively to support the Maryland's Comprehensive State Crime Control and Prevention Plan, a planning and guiding document Gcpyvs is required to provide to the governor. Exhibit 7 on page 14 shows how the additional funding might be distributed in fiscal '23 if it were to be allocated based on each jurisdiction's proportion of Part 1 crimes reported in the 2020 Uniform Crime Report. DLS recommends adding budget language, restructuring the enhanced SAP funding to better target jurisdictions facing higher instances of reported crime. Now I'll move on to the agency's personnel data. As mentioned previously, the office's personnel grows in the allowance for 10 civilian coordinators for the PROTECT program. Each will be assigned to a high-crime microzone within the state. I'd also like to point out that as of December 31st, 2021, there were 12 vacant regular positions in Gcpyvs. As the office only has 56 regular positions in the working appropriation, this means that more than 1 in 5 positions are vacant. All vacant positions have been vacant for less than a year. I'll now turn to the issues portion of the presentation. There are 3, and the first is that concerns regarding grant oversight continue in this year as well. Gcpyvs oversees $31 million, that's the wrong figure, about $317 million in grants across all fund types. There's a typo in the document, I apologize about that, which includes more than $226.3 million in general fund grants. In response to Gcpyvs reporting $17.2 million in general fund reversions in fiscal 2020, including a significant number of erroneous grant reversions, language in the 2021 JCR restricted funds within the agency's budget to be used for contracting with a private accounting firm to perform a fiscal audit of the agency and its grants management processes. Funds are also withheld pending a report on the audit's findings. Though the report was due December 31st, the office requested an extension of the report through the rest of fiscal 2022, and it was granted. The office reports that the RFP has been approved but not yet posted, as it intends to hire a procurement officer first. Gcpyvs should update the committees on the status of the grants management audit today. And that language is further down there. Moving now to Exhibit 9. The reporting of metrics relating to grant oversight raises some concerns. Exhibit 9 shows the percentage of grants in compliance, the percentage of grants with above average compliance, and the number of grant audits completed between fiscal 2016 and 2021. 2 of these grant performance output metrics were not provided in the fiscal 22 or 2023 MFR submission, along with several other measures related to grants management. In OPEGA's recently published performance evaluation of Gcpyvs, which will be discussed in the 3rd issue, the office reports that it had moved away from tracking the performance of its subrecipients in the MFR to the performance and efficiency of its different divisions using various output measures. The office also states that it does not have direct control over the performance of its subrecipients. While it's obvious that Gcpyvs cannot control its subrecipients, who are independent entities, Gcpyvs is, however, responsible for directly overseeing whether subrecipients use the funds in accordance with the terms of grant award agreements. DLS therefore recommends that $100,000 in general funds be withheld until the office returns to reporting the following grant management MFR measures in its annual submission: the percentage of grants in irregular status, the percentage of grants in risk status audited, the percentage of closed grants with above average compliance and with conditions and regulations of grants, the percentage of unused federal funds returned, and the percentage of unused state funds returned. I will note that one grant management aspect that the office continues to report on and that has seen improvement is the number of percent of grants receiving site visits. The office largely attributes this increase between fiscal 2020 and 2021 with its ability to conduct site visits virtually. The second issue relates to the Voca program, which seeks to provide victims of crime with assistance and services to support their restoration following a violent crime and to help them navigate the criminal justice processes. Historically, a victim service providers were funded through the Voca program included both non-state providers and state agency providers. Exhibit 11 on page 21 shows that federal Voca funds, which are awarded annually and may be expended up to 3 years after they are awarded, have declined since their peak in federal fiscal year 2015 or 2018. I'm sorry about that. The federal fiscal 21 award was only $18.9 million, approximately 31% of the federal fiscal 2018 level. The 2022 award is expected to be similar to 2021's and will be published in September. In recognition that federal awards to the states had declined and that this could have negative effects on victims of crime, the U.S. Congress passed the Voca Fix to sustain the Crime Victims Fund Act of 2021, also referred to as the Voca Fix. Part of the Voca Fix was to allow states to access funds from previously closed federal funding cycles. For Gcpyvs, this included about $4.5 million from the federal fiscal 2018 award. The agency reports that it also expects federal awards to increase because of the Voca Fix, but this will take place over the next 3 to 10 years. Exhibit 12 on page 22 shows the Voca program's expenditures between state fiscal year 2015 through the 2023 allowance. Legislative appropriations and actual spending increased to take advantage of the higher federal fund awards. For the 2020 grant funding cycle, for example, Gcpyvs offered modified continued funding streams to subrecipients, and subrecipients were eligible to receive up to an additional 10% of funding based on their level of grant-funded personnel. During the 2021 session, budget language required Gcpyvs to prioritize non-state victim services providers over state providers. The language also required Voca funding to be awarded to individual service providers at a level equal to that of fiscal 2020, creating another year of continuation funding. The 2021 JCR required the office to submit 2 supports on a Voca grant award data and a letter to the budget committees. $1.5 million in general funds from the office's administrative headquarters was withheld for those purposes. Although these materials were provided to the legislature several months beyond the requested submission date, and the letter was only sent this morning, the information largely meets the requirements of the budget language, and the DLS recommends the release of withheld funds. Unfortunately, funding from the federal government to Maryland's Voca program was reduced by about 37.7% between federal fiscal 2020 and 2021, seen previously in Exhibit 11. In September, the agency reported that it was able to use reserve funds to reduce the fiscal 2022 cuts to about 19.8% across all non-state recipients, and by not funding state providers, including the Secretary of State, DHCD, and DPSCS, as required by the 2021 budget bill language. However, it could not provide information at that time to allow DLS to verify how the cut was applied. In October, a budget amendment was processed which added ARPA funds for Gcpyvs to fund the non-state providers and for the state agencies to receive their expected funding. This $19.8 million is shown in the rightmost column of Exhibit 13 with this little asterisk that it's ARPA funding. The total fiscal 2022 award is expected to be about $49.8 million, which is also higher than the $29.6 million currently listed in the governor's budget books, as Gcpyvs spends these ARPA funds and exhausts its reserves and remaining funds from previous federal award cycles. Gcpyvs reports that it currently has adequate federal fund authorizations to cover the fiscal 2022 and 2023 appropriations After accounting for the future award of federal fiscal 2022 Voca funds and providing the office can encumber fiscal 2022 ARPA funds for fiscal 2023. The totals column in this Exhibit 13 demonstrates, though, that there will not be enough federal Voca funding to continue funding non-state providers beginning in fiscal 2024 at their current level. General funds will then need to be provided to keep existing providers funded at their current level of support. Scrolling down a little bit, there we go. I will also note that the office's delays in having the audit of its grants processes performed may have also delayed the questions about the Voca program funding from being answered and reconciled to the final dollar. To increase transparency regarding the use of federal Voca funds, DLS again recommends adding budget language, restricting funds pending the submission of a report detailing the expenditures of the 4 most recently closed Voca funding cycles, how changes in the level of funding impacts the continuity of Voca services in Maryland, and a comparison of the legislative appropriation and actual Voca expenditures for the most recent 6 state fiscal years. The third and final issue concerns a performance evaluation of Gcpyvs that was recently conducted and published by the DLS Office of Performance Evaluation and Government Accountability. The performance evaluation observes that the budget of Gcpyvs and its historical components grew by over a third between fiscal 2017 and 2021, making it larger than 9 of Maryland's principal departments. That's not including the additional grant funding that they're receiving in fiscal 23, also increasing their size. It observes that the crime rate in Maryland has generally been falling since the early 2000s as well. The document includes 24 recommendations for the agency. 3 of OPEGA's recommendations for Gcpyvs are the following. Future crime plans for the office that the office creates should include quantifiable goals and metrics. The General Assembly should consider requiring that future Gcpyvs executive directors be appointed with the advice and consent of the Senate, and the agencies should submit all mandated reports in a timely manner. Gcpyvs is not required to implement the recommended changes, but to the extent that it does, its capacity to meet its complex vision and mission may be improved. DLS recommends the addition of committee narrative to require Gcpyvs to submit a 1-year update detailing its implementation or further response to OPEGA's recommendations and detailing any associated expenditures. The recommended budget bill language and committee narrative begin on page 26, but are also summarized on page 2. That concludes my budget presentation, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Senator Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the report. I will have a document from my office coming to you regarding a couple of the pages in the report, so we can follow up later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions from the committee at this moment, we're going to bring up, look like Chief of Staff Karaman.
Hello,
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. It's a privilege to testify before you today. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Yesham Karaman, and I serve as the Chief of Staff for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services. I've been honored to serve on this team since November. Cameron Edsel, our Legislative Affairs Manager, is joining me today. And our agency would like to thank Madeline Miller, the Dls Analyst, for her diligent work covering our office. Thank you. As many of you know, our office is in a period of transition, and without a permanent executive director, I'll be testifying today. If there are any questions that I'm unable to answer during the hearing, our office will gladly provide a written response to those questions afterward. The Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services embodies a multidisciplinary and collaborative approach that Governor Hogan has taken to build a safer Maryland. As the very name of our agency implies, our office works to address 3 key areas: crime prevention, working with our law enforcement partners across the state of Maryland to take down violent criminals, providing support for victims tragically affected by crime in our state, and working to make sure that our children and youth have the tools they need to be successful in life. Our Victim Services Unit directly supports victims of crime and the organizations that help serve them. And we're extremely proud that since 2015, our agency has helped support more than 1 million crime victims. And through our office, Governor Hogan has directed more than $335 million to support victims of crime. The Hogan administration has also invested $227 million in children and youth serving organizations around the state over the last 7 years, including working to mitigate adverse childhood experiences among our younger generation. Because that's what taking a comprehensive approach is all about: arresting the violent criminals, building up the communities that they've terrorized, and helping those that have fallen victim to crime, and constantly working to prevent crime around the state of Maryland. And since Governor Hogan has taken office, we're proud to have distributed more than $1 billion across the state to support these key disciplines. Because building a safer Maryland isn't something that can be done alone. It takes an all-hands-on-deck approach. And with that, in addition to the written testimony which you all have, this concludes our remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the opportunity for the members to speak to Chief of Staff this morning. Pretty much along the same lines of the DLS report. Chief of Staff has received my concerns. Mr. Chairman, you have a copy of it as well, and I will share with the committee when I get my responses. So welcome. Looking forward to working with you. I've had an extensive amount of experience working with this office by its previous name, GoCap, and then its new name as well, its current name as well. I have worked very closely over the years in my capacity and in my previous life as Sheriff of Prince George's County, working with Voca and the other providers and services that this state offers. And just as a note, we would like to certainly work very closely with you to ensure that our citizens, including our youth, our victims, and our state continues to move forward. So that's a statement from me, and I think the rest of the committee echoes that. But I'm looking forward to your responses in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We look forward to working closely together with you as well.
Yep, and Madam Chief of Staff, just a couple questions. Some are just going to center on Voca, the first parts of them. Could you speak to how much ARPA funds is going to be used in this fiscal year 2023 budget in reference to Voca funds?
Thank you, Chairman. At this time, I cannot speculate how much in ARPA funds can be used. I can't speak on behalf of the governor.
Okay. Well, I'm asking questions from the information that's given from advocates. I think that I always try my best to be respectful and let the agency correct if wrong, but I'm going to insert that the advocates are saying that there's $14 million that's going to be used for Voca funds from ARPA. The second piece of it, how much money are you all requesting from the federal government in the traditional money that we receive from Voca?
Thank you, Chairman. So we're actually currently undergoing our process of requesting our federal appropriations, and our office is requesting $50.7 million, which would make all recipients whole, as we did for the past 2 years.
Okay, so you're acknowledging that $50+ million obviously is what flat funds Voca funding, correct?
Those are what we have funded for the last 2 years.
Yep. And you're also acknowledging that you have in a request for $50+ million in reference to Voca funding for fiscal year 2023?
For our federal appropriations, yes.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure. In reference to the funds that have been expended, the obligated, what we use as the word is returned back or from the Voca funding, how much has that been in the past several years?
I don't have access to that right now, but I'm happy to provide a written response detailing that information to you.
Okay, and the advocates want to know, like, that money that has been returned back, how is that being repurposed, how is that being sent out, and how is that being spent? And I do think that that is an adequate question and something that we look forward to getting a response back to you from. And then the third one, we all know about the Great Resignation. We know that many agencies have faced it, but if you can just explain the challenges from the agency and how that has impacted the folks that may have to deal with the agency in reference to Voca funding.
Thank you, Senator. I believe you're referring to Mr. Pewson's departure.
No, just in general, like, you see vacancy as high as 20% in some of the agencies. So you have, while your leadership is departed, obviously the there's vacancies within the agency?
So we do have a few vacancies. We're actively trying to fulfill all of them by posting positions, working closely with our DBM HR experts. But none of these vacancies have been vacant for longer than a year. There are no long-term vacancies.
And back to the question was,
I
obviously, the
apologize.
folks that are advocates are saying that they're deeply impacted by the vacancies within the respective agencies. Just wanted to hear the agency's position, and how do you believe that the vacancies are impacting the folks that have to deal with the agencies concerning Voca funding?
So as always, our promise to customer service is number one, and we will always strive to provide excellent customer service to our citizens and advocates, stakeholders across the state, and we continue to evaluate the resources at hand to continuously improve ourselves.
Yep. And I'm gonna get to I'm gonna switch subjects, and I'm gonna go to Sap Funding. And I looked at your response, I looked at the recommendation from DLS, and I know that this is a very interesting position that you may be in as I ask this question. So there's a significant bump in money that's gonna go to Sap Funding, through you all's budget at this moment. And the DLS recommendations stated things that I would think is probably normal, that when we spend tax dollars, people's tax dollars, that we want to spend them in the most efficient manner possible. So I looked at you all's response, and I looked at DLS's recommendation, then I looked at you all's response again, and you all didn't agree with their response in reference to directing the money based off of the crime that happens in a respective jurisdiction, because that, to me, would be like the most efficient. You kind of said, no, we want to kind of just have it there, but you also listed other things where you have taken that position, where we are directing resources where the need is, where we're going to get the best bang for our buck within that respective subject matter or that respective area. So I didn't understand why you all didn't agree, or why the agency didn't agree that this money should be appropriated to address the public safety issues, some of us dealing with the highest crime that we've ever dealt with in the month of January. Like, this is record-breaking crime, so like, why wouldn't those resources be spent the most efficient way possible to get the biggest bang for taxpayers' bucks?
Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, so with regards to the recommendation for the SAP funding, and as our response stated, since this is a statutorily formula-funded program, any modifications, especially with regards to instances of high reported crime, would potentially modify it to create what we view as maybe an inequitable distribution of funds. And so our belief as an agency is that since it's statute, the enhanced funding should be available to all qualifying agencies, not just those necessarily with higher crime statistics. That way they get the support that they need to make sure that our communities are safe.
So I'm not going to make it a back and forth, because obviously you have a job and I have a job to do. And as oversight, when I think of it, I just want to remind folks that you do have a formula, and that formula is based off of traditional money that has always been appropriated. There's a significant bump in SAP funding to deal with public safety issues across the state of Maryland. And you listed a number of programs that deal with efficiency, just making sure that folks get their biggest bang for that buck. And I'm inclined, I don't know how the committee is going to go in what direction, but I'm very inclined. I'm very frugal, I think about money a lot, and I'm inclined to move the direction to get the biggest bang for taxpayers. Now, people don't want to pay more tax. These are folks' dollars that we're talking about. How do you spend that in the most efficient manner, especially when there are new dollars added, not old dollars that's there? So I don't want to make it a back and forth, and I get that you have a job to do. I'm going to see if the committee has any more questions. Seeing no more questions, this ends the bill hearing for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention. I just want to say thank you for your leadership, Madam Chief of Staff, for stepping in. I know it's a time. I won't say difficult. It's a time. And I'll be honest with you. While I acknowledge the Comptroller and just the enjoyment that I had working with his respective agency, I cannot say that that's the same for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention during the tenure that I've been able to serve in this position. But I hope that as we go forward, that with that partnership, that will look different.
We certainly hope we can change your mind.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all, and thank you, Ms. Miller, for your due diligence.
Thank
At
you.
this time, we'll call up our last agency, which is the State Highway Administration, MDOT, and we have our transportation guru, Mr. Steve McCullough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Steve McCullough with Department of Legislative Service, here to present the State Highway Administration budget. The operating budget for fiscal 2023 for the state highway increases by $22 million, or 7.2% over the current year working appropriation. The PAYGO portion of the budget increases by $32.8 million, or 2.5%. And we will be discussing the PAYGO a little bit later. Jumping right into the managing for results discussion. Exhibit 1 shows the traffic fatality and fatality rates for Maryland. And the fatality rate is based on the number of road fatalities per 100 million miles of vehicle mile traveled. And you can see that in fiscal 2020, the number of fatalities and the rate both did increase. Exhibit 2 discusses the percent of vehicle miles during the evening peak hour that are traveled in congested conditions. And you can see that in 2020, with the beginning of the pandemic and the reduction of road miles traveled, that congested travel decreased greatly. However, you can see that in 2022, it's estimated that certainly on the freeway and expressway, which is the blue bars, that is expected to return to close to pre-pandemic levels. Exhibit 3 talks about the percent of bridges in the state highway network that have one or more components rated as poor. This new rating of poor replaces what used to be described as structurally deficient bridges. Maryland does very well in this area. And as you can see, this is the percentage of state-owned bridges, and it's been going down. It's just over 1%. And Maryland, as I said, does very well compared to most other states in the nation. Exhibit 4 shows the percent of highway network and overall preferred maintenance condition going from fiscal 2022 through 2021 with the goal as the black bar. You can see that over the past 5 years, the agency met this goal 4 times, and in 2021 just barely missed that. The department does note that some of the pandemic responses, such as social distancing, required them to do split shifts. And actually, even though there were some times where they had more access to the roads, if you had half your staff working at some points, that did have a slight impact, and they did just barely miss the goal. Exhibit 5 turns to a discussion of the agency spending, and this shows that SHA relies about equally on its own personnel, including contractual personnel, and contractual services to carry out its mission of maintaining the roads and highways in the state. Exhibit 6 is a discussion of the proposed budget, and as I indicated at the beginning, $21.9 million increase. There is about $1.2 million net increase in personnel expenses. The remaining increases are largely related to highway maintenance equipment, contracts, and the like. Looking at snow removal, just because this is an issue that we've discussed many times over the years, back in 2020, the Budget Committees adopted, and ultimately the General Assembly adopted intent language indicating that SHA should budget their snow removal expenses at the 5-year actual expense rate level that they had been doing. They had been following this for many years. Then a couple of years previously, they had not adhered to this. The fiscal 2023 budget increases by $5 million as stated in the intent, and is budgeted at $76 million. Coincidentally, the 5-year average ending in fiscal 2021 is just over $75.3 million. So they are, complying with the intent, and because they are at that 5-year level, going forward, if they just budget to that every year, the 5-year level, whether it goes up or down, they'll be in compliance with the intent of the legislature. Looking at personnel detail, there are no increases or decreases in regular or contractual positions in the operating budget. There are some reduction in contractual positions in the capital budget. The vacancy rate for the department is set at 8%. That's 236 positions that we need to maintain over the fiscal year. Exhibit 7 is the discussion of the state aid, which is known as highway user revenues. As you may recall, this was converted to a mandated capital grant a number of years ago. Exhibit 7 shows the actual working and allowance for the state aid. It increases by $10.2 million in the allowance, and that is simply a fact of revenue estimates. So, revenues are recovering after the shortfalls or the downturn caused by COVID. Exhibit 8 shows the allocation for the counties and municipalities of this aid, and is there for your reference at a later time. Turning now to the capital program, Exhibit 9 shows the 6-year capital program by investment category, and this shows that over the 6-year period, system preservation, as you would expect, is the largest expected area of expenditure for the capital program. You can see each of the bars there showing how things change year to year. Exhibit 10 shows the cash flow for SHA, and the top portion of this table shows the change between the 2022 budget as introduced versus the 2022 working appropriation. That increased a total of $215 million, with most of that increase occurring in the system preservation and minor project funding, with an increase of $143 million. The bottom part of the table shows the change between the current year working appropriation and the allowance, and that increases by $32.8 million, as I had indicated at the beginning. And again, system preservation and minor projects is the largest area of change shown there. Exhibit 11 is an annual exhibit that we show. It runs for several pages, so I won't go over it, but it lists the major projects in SHA's allowance. In order to be on this list, the project had to have at least $1 million in funding in the allowance, fiscal 2023, or $5 million or more in funding over the 6-year program. So don't panic if you know of a project that's not on this list. It probably just doesn't meet one or two or the other. Does not mean it's not in the program. It just means didn't make the exhibit. Exhibit 12 shows the significant changes to major projects since last year's CTP. So the top portion shows the new projects that were added to the construction program. There were also programs that are moved from the development and evaluation portion of the CTP into the construction program. And then the bottom part of this table shows new projects that are added to the development and evaluation portion of the program for future development to be a future construction project. Turning now to the issues, the first issue regards the work safety zone program. Last year, the committees adopted committee narrative requesting SHA to talk about and submit a report explaining how they keep workers safe, especially or including those workers working in trenches. SHA submitted the report, which outlines their safety zone program. It has 4 main areas: the engineering, enforcement, training, and education. And Exhibit 13 on page 23 shows each of the components within those areas. Exhibit 14 shows the number of work zone crashes and fatalities. So the area part of it shows the crashes, with property damage crashes shown in the blue, and injury crashes shown in the salmon color at the top. The lines show, the yellow line shows the number of construction worker fatalities that have occurred since 2015, and then the red line shows the non-worker fatalities in work zones since 2015. This data does lag because the state police does an investigation of all these fatalities, and they have to complete their investigations before SHA includes them in their statistics so that they're categorized correctly. The second issue is just raises for discussion whether the use of congestion pricing in Maryland should be expanded. As you are all aware, the Op Lanes Maryland project around the Capitol Beltway is intended to add 2 managed toll lanes in each direction along from the American Legion Bridge or just south up I-270, with the full project as envisioned would be the entire Maryland section of the Beltway. And those toll lanes would have dynamic tolling where toll rates raise as congestion raises and decrease as congestion falls. The Federal Highway Administration indicates there are 3 main types of congestion pricing strategies that are used or being considered in the United States. The first is variable price lanes, which is exactly the Op Lanes Maryland proposal, where some lanes are being added, but they're alongside other free lanes. The second type is variable pricing on an entire facility. So bridges or tunnels would fall into this category, or if there were a totally dedicated toll road with no free lanes accompanying it, that would fall into that category. And then the third type, which is being considered, has not been used yet in the United States, but has been used in other parts of the world, is cordon pricing, where there is a charge imposed for driving into a congested area. So this would be used for large cities, and currently London and a few other cities around the world do have a cordon pricing feature in place, and the idea there is it charges people to go into these congested areas, which discourages them and encourages the use of other methods of traveling into those areas. New York City has proposed this, but they are working on it. It has not yet been implemented, but if they do actually implement that, it could serve as a model for other large urban areas to consider in addressing congestion. We do note that use of congestion pricing can have negative impacts, particularly on low-income commuters who are not able to shift their travel and avoid these congestion pricing areas on something like a total facility. Obviously, if there's a managed lanes and also free lanes, these commuters do have a choice at that point. We do note that in some cases, going forward, it might be possible to structure a program where congestion pricing could be used to also provide options for funding public transit. I would think that would particularly apply to a cordon pricing model where you're collecting for going into an area and not having to maintain that area with similar to a toll road, which the tolls are generally dedicated to the facility upkeep. We've asked MDOT to comment on all of this, to talk about how it might be used, where it could be used throughout the state, where it is prohibited from use by federal law. The second issue, the third issue is the discussion of the Op Lanes Maryland. This was covered in the overview. However, since you heard the overview, a judge in Montgomery County Circuit Court, hearing the protest of one of the losing bidders for the phase development agreement, did find for the firm that challenged the ruling, and the judge did indicate that on some of the arguments that the department should reconsider or actually consider the actual merits of the bidder's challenge. At the time the department went through its process the first time, it denied the protest based on what it said was inadequate timeliness on the filing of the protests. So we've asked MDOT to update you on that status. Issue 4 is the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. That was covered in the overview, so I'll skip to the recommended actions. For both the operating and the capital programs, the recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. McCulloch. And at this time, we're going to bring up secretary reports and our administrator from SHA.
All right, great. Well, good afternoon, Chairman McCray and members of the committee. For the record, again, my name is Jim Port, Secretary for Maryland Department of Transportation. And with me today is Tim Smith, Administrator of Maryland State Highway Administration. And of course, we're glad to be here to share some of MDOT SHA's achievements. As always, I'd like to thank Dls Analyst Steve McCulloch for the work he's done with understanding MDOT. And with that, despite the challenges of the pandemic and the collateral impacts, our transportation team has worked diligently to keep the nation's supply chain moving and our construction projects on track. Providing innovative congestion relief solutions is vital to reducing travel times, improving our quality of life, and spurring economic recovery. One of the projects focused on accomplishing that goal is the Baltimore Region's Transportation Systems Management and Operations Project. This project will help relieve congestion along I-695 between I-70 and Maryland 43 by providing additional lane during peak travel times. Over on the I-270, we reached a milestone in August on our innovative congestion management project, which utilizes for the first time the use of ramp metering in Maryland. Ramp metering is a proven cost-effective tool to help address congestion and improve safety by regulating traffic flow onto the highway. And we're looking to the future with a focus on preserving what we have, planning for future projects, and building what we can to further support Maryland's economy. With that, I will now turn it over to Tim Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and honor to lead the State Highway team. I just wanted to quickly start with quick mentioning of our frontline employees. We talked about winter here a little earlier, but I think they've really been truly value what it means to be team first. So I just wanted to highlight a few things. We've had 7 winter events that have been statewide so far. We've averaged 28 inches across the entire state, across our 28 maintenance shops. And that, for Senator Edwards, we've had 82 inches out in Kaiser's Ridge. So that's some ice and snow there. And then, more importantly, we had one storm in late January. A nor'easter hit more of the Ocean City area. So we had 10 to 12 inches in Ocean City. We kind of redeployed forces from our central Maryland and western Maryland to help our folks down in the lower eastern shore. I, for one, am ready for winter to conclude, but yet I know Mother Nature still has a little more in store for us. But as spring approaches, we know folks will be engaging in more outside activities, walking, pedestrians, and bike, as well as those folks that commute that way. So we have these highway users in mind as we continue to dedicate more resources and time to improving safety for our vulnerable users. So just some quick stats there. Over the last 5 years, roughly 25% of our fatalities on Maryland roadways have been pedestrians or bikes. So for us to achieve a Vision Zero goal, we must dedicate additional focus in that area. So we're building a shelf of projects focused on improving accessibility and safety for our vulnerable users. As those larger projects are being developed, we have already implemented 270 kind of operational improvements throughout the state. So as the Secretary mentioned, we're implementing Vision Zero improvements, but along with that, we're preserving our existing infrastructure with an asset management philosophy, as well as relieving congestion in the 3 main categories. So pivoting to the Dls Analysis, I want to echo what the Secretary mentions. I want to express my appreciation to Steve and his efforts in partnership and recommendations. His work and perspective are valuable and always make us better as an organization. Regarding the DLS's recommended actions on the operating budget and PAYGO budget, obviously we concur. We've provided written responses to the questions raised because they were more narrative in nature. So I thank you for your patience and be happy to answer and respond to any questions you have at this time.
Senator Saley.
Thank you so much for all the information. I know, and again, we have a lot going on in Western Maryland. They get a ton of snow out there, and we always get that good report from our good senator. And I know we have state workers and contractors, and we have a lot of different contractors that do a lot of work. I'd like to know possibly how you get the contractors. I like to see how, if there's others that could also be a part of the state of Maryland to work with them. I'd like to see other opportunities, and I don't know if you're short. I don't know if you have enough, but it's always good to have more, and not to have enough. How could we go about that? If that's just one question, and I have one more also.
You want to answer it? Go ahead.
Yeah, so if you have somebody that's interested, if they contact their local shop, and I'd be happy to work with you to figure out who that might be, we work through the state of emergency once we know winter's coming. We go through the procurement process that way. But actually what contractors do is reach, and we set up a contract with each individual contractor at the shop level. So we have 28 shops across the state, so it's functions that way, but then it ultimately funnels through our central office. So I'm happy to work with you to figure out that particular group, if you're interested.
Thank you. And also, just one more thing, Mr. Chair. We have a lot going on at Trade Point Atlantic, as you know. And we're going to be having more moving parts. We're going to have, of course, more trucks, more employees. We have a ton going on. We have a few more things going on this year. Knowing that all of that movement that we have 695, we have 95, we have other areas that connect there. We also have other small, we have a peninsula, we have 151, which is North Point Boulevard, and all of them are state roads. And I want to just make sure, because we had, and I'm going to thank you, Secretary, for the opportunity for the local and Maryland transportation workers that are around our community, that they worked with us and we were able to go through, especially 151 and the accident that we had there at that intersection. I like in time, when we have right now over 10,000 employees, probably by the end of the year we'll have 12. We have a couple other businesses that will be a part of that. I'd like to, in time, maybe assess in that area maybe one more time, especially 151, for the traveling and the trucks and the employees that are going to be moving through the area. We talked about lighting and how important it is, and I'd like to see if there's some areas where we can still look, maybe we get more lighting in the area, because we talked about how poor it is in some of the areas and why we do have some accidents in that area. And maybe just see where we can do more so. And we did, I thank you, we did get the information of the assessment that they had. And I'd like to get back with them also to see what they're gonna do the work on 151. But again, if we can work together to see in time, if we can assess that again in another 6 months, and just see, because I know there's gonna be a lot more activity, which we already know. And if we can work together, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we agree, and I personally have been down to TPA several times, some at the very, very beginning, and then throughout, and whether it was dealing with MTA, SHA, or MDTA, we have been down there several times, working with Aaron Tamarchio and his team. And so we will continue to assess that as we move forward, because it is one of the largest job centers that we have in the state, quite frankly, but certainly in the Baltimore region. So we'll continue that effort, I can assure you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Senator. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the updates, Mr. Secretary and Mr. Administrator. Just two quick things. One, Senator Rosapep and a few of us are talking about the apprenticeship programs throughout the state of Maryland and how we can, build that pool of folks that Senator Stallings was talking about. And so you'll be seeing something further on that. And secondly, please keep us up to date on the congestion pricing, which was issue number 2, I believe it was, and how that would impact. I mean, we would love to walk through that with you. There are certain areas, obviously, of our state and the city that could benefit. Could also, we don't want to have any unintentional challenges out of that as well. So let's work together.
Sure.
All right, cool.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, on the apprenticeship program, as you have heard me say before, I came up through the trades similar to your chairman, And we already began an apprenticeship program for some of the maintenance workers for vehicles at MTA. And we worked with the college system, CCBC, to integrate what our needs were with the college. I also, when I saw that Senator Rosenpep had the bill in, I immediately called him and said, look, this is something I'm interested in, this is something I've tried. As a matter of fact, I was the one that started the Procurement Academy at the Department of Transportation, which become a model for the entire state for procurement officials, and where we have levels of, everybody learns everything, the basics, and then they get to progress up through the system. And so we didn't have, we wanted to make it a career change, not just a job. And so one of the things that as a matter of fact, I talked to Senator Rosenpep yesterday about the apprenticeship program that I like to do. And I know that a lot of high schools have vocational and technical schools. My daughter went to one. She's a special ed teacher, and she learned teaching at one of those schools. And so I'm a big believer in it. And I think that instead of just focusing on people who are going to college when they have the awards ceremonies at the end of the year for the seniors, I think we should also focus on job opportunities for a lot of these kids. And so I'm full in, trust me, on this, and we're going to be working together on that issue. And congestion pricing, obviously, as Steve had mentioned, we do have the TRP in the Washington area, which we believe is going to change the dynamics of traffic in that area. I was a big believer in it when we did the I-95 express toll lanes. I was in the Ehrlich administration as deputy secretary at that time and started that project, and I still have the battle scars from that with the Lexus lanes and all that kind of talk. But I can assure you, each and every day in the morning, that was a parking lot, and each and every day in the afternoon, it was a parking lot. And after those lanes were put in, it's no longer a parking lot, and we're extending those lanes because we know it works. And so where we can find areas in the state where we can transition and possibly add some of those lanes to allow that to occur, I think it'd be beneficial for the state, and so we're going to look at that.
Thank you. Senator Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple quick things here. First of all, I want to thank you for the outstanding job your department does. I tell people all the time, people who kind of don't want to come to Garrett County after October because of snow, but I tell them we have the best road crews in the world, not just the state, but the county, and I put them up against anybody. They do a tremendous job. And we really appreciate that. According to the Weather Channel on my phone here, mentioned snow. Of course, they change it every 10 minutes, but 2 days next week, there's 40% chance of snow, so you might not put the snow plows away yet.
I could have done without that, Mr. Chairman.
Anyway, I remember at one time, what do you classify, it used to be the cutoff, it had to be $6 million or more to be classified a major project. Is that still in effect, or what's the definition of a major project?
Oh, major project. I thought it was 5 million. 10 million. It used to be 5 million, I believe, and now it's 10 billion.
Okay, I thought it was 6, but 6 and 5 is close.
They're
10
close.
million now? Yeah,
10.
okay. Well, with inflation, fine. Safety issues. Years ago, you used to have these poles and you put like a 2x2 reflector on them. And I worked with former secretaries and went on a trip, and I saw these. They just finished a project in upstate New York where I went. And they had like 6 2x6s reflected. I mean, it made a heck of a difference. So I got with your people back at that period of time, been a while now. So that's what they've gone to, at least in my part of the state. I don't know about the rest of the state. And it makes a big difference. And just last year, and I don't know how familiar you are with Savage Mountain, the cut Savage Mountain just west of Frostburg, which really gets some bad weather, especially when you get the winds are blowing and the snow blowing. They're about like this now, which is great. Because I talked to them about right across the border in Pennsylvania, they got them about that wide and about that tall. And for safety purposes, it really makes a big difference. But one of the things is they don't come around and replace those reflective tapes on them very often. So I want to request that, that you have a regular, I guess, replacement program for the reflective strips on these poles next to the road so people can see them better, because you get in snow, those things you put in the middle of the road, reflectors are nice if you have good weather, but if you got
Not
snow and
snow.
stuff, you can't see them. And safety's a big factor all over, but particularly when you get up in the mountains with the snow and the fog and everything else. So I would ask you to look into that. And I'm glad to see that I didn't get any calls this year from contractors that their pay wasn't arriving on time, so that must all got worked out. So appreciate that. So just two more quick things, Mr. Chairman. You might put your shop people to work and have them come up with an invent, a new paint that has reflections in the paint that you put on the roads that last longer than 6 months. Because you come up there in the spring and you repaint the roads, stripe the roads. 6 months, it's pretty well wore off. You don't come back till the next spring. Well, then you're getting into the bad weather and you can't, not good. So maybe there is something else out there and you can find it and try a pilot somewhere. Again, I'm looking at safety here. And the only other thing is I hope you'll keep working very closely with Pennsylvania and keep on them so we can get this 219 project finished, which will be one of the biggest economic booms for Mountain Maryland in a long time. And they are moving forward in Pennsylvania. We're working closely with them. I think that you'll finish up whatever it is we're working on now next year or two, and then hopefully we have our money basically in place. That because of that, it'll nudge Pennsylvania and move theirs up the chart.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, thank you.
Yes, sir. And Senator Saling's coming around for a second bite at the apple.
Yeah, that was good. So I have just one more thing, and this has been paid attention to at one time. On 695, there's a turn that's before a bridge. And from what I've been told more than once, the engineer and the way they did it, it was wrong.
Is what?
It was done wrong,
Oh,
very wrong. Because when you go there, I think they've already placed 10 to 15 lights there, and they've had serious accidents on that turn. And when you turn, it already pulls your car out of lane.
is that the turnaround?
No, that's a turn. It's a regular turn on 695, just before a bridge, and just before you get to Eastern Avenue, which is 150, and Merritt Boulevard, those exits.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yes. And I've seen, I don't know how many vehicles have got accidents there. It's been pretty serious. And that's a turn which I think needs to be looked at again.
So let's.
Because that's on one side, you can see it. When I drive that every time, it pulls my vehicle to the right.
Okay.
If I'm in that left lane, I try to stay as close as I can to that line.
Okay.
Because I know it's gonna pull me some way.
Okay.
And it's been a problem for years. And again, I think we need to look at that again. It's been, again, every time I've gone by there has been, you can see it where the tires and how it's skirted in some of the areas.
Okay.
And it's just, I'm glad I just remembered that. It's something that was brought to my attention, but I think it's something that maybe we need to look at that and see what we possibly can do to correct that. So I appreciate that.
We can look at that, and there are some applications that you can put on the surface that will make it, I guess, a little rougher and make the friction work a little better. He could probably tell you more about it than I can. Go ahead, Tim, tell him.
Well, it looks like we probably need to look at the geometrics and the super elevation there through there.
See.
But what we did was, in a couple other areas where we had high frequently folks running off the roadway, Jim was correct, is we have some high friction treatment applications that we can apply that help improve traction at that particular
I
bridge.
think
But
if
happy to look in that.
I think it would be really good to put something there.
We can look
to
at
try to
that.
help that out. And I think if you could probably get some reports.
We did
of the
it,
accidents, you would see that there's a high accident area.
We did a 100, right as you come off of 100 off of 97. It was a terrible friction area, and we put some high friction pavement on there, and it really stopped a lot of the problems. So we can certainly look at that, but thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I only had one question, be very brief response. I looked at the DLS report, talked about congested tolling. I looked at you all's response, very adequate. Agency has significant amount of power, authority already to implement congested tolling. But the one part that I didn't see that the agency, DLS had mentioned, was the impact on low-income folks. And I just want to understand, how does the agency take that into consideration?
Well, I think there's a couple ways to do that, and one is, as Steve had mentioned, so when you add these lanes, and again, they were called Lexus lanes and all that stuff, and quite frankly, it's not
I
true.
call them Cadillac lanes.
Oh, you had Cadillac, yeah, I don't have a Lexus, I don't have either one of them, so. But anyway, what actually occurs is people may not use them every day, but they'll use them when it's important to them. You know, I know when I had a reveal for my son, I was running late, and guess what? I got in that lane and took it because it's the only way I was going to make it, right? But I didn't take it every day, and so that's one way. So that when it becomes important, a person gets to the doctor's office or something like that. The other thing that occurs, and we've seen this all over, and I mentioned it with Senator Jackson. You know, when we did the express toll lanes, everybody again called them Lexus lanes, but the free lanes, if you will, were much more free. And they flowed a lot better because you took 10 to 20% of the population that were in these lanes, put them in these lanes. So quite frankly, everyone benefits in that approach. And then, of course, we do add MTA, so bus service with TRP. There's a robust bus service that we're looking at that would help low income, and of course we have the HOV. So there's several different ways where we can help people, help everyone, quite frankly. And it's sort of like the airplane, you know. The business folks pay the real high prices so that all us other folks get a cheaper ticket.
Got it. I got to verse myself in reference to congested tolling. There was 3 different versions or examples that was there. I get the one because we got one on 95, but I just want to make sure that I understand MDOT's vision and SHA's vision in this.
Well, it's not SHA, it'll be MDTA in this case.
Yep, you're right.
Because MDTA is the only ones that can toll.
So I got no more questions. I do want to kind of lift you all up for a moment, if you don't mind. I know I had a personal experience with SHA just several weeks ago, a couple months ago, and just, you know, one of my colleagues said it on the floor in reference to how responsive you are, calling you in the middle of the night in reference to those issues that you actually did pick up. But I know that I haven't been able to say anything to the administrator because I know he had his hands in on it, so just wanted to say thank you.
Okay.
Also, just on behalf of the committee, I think that it's important to recognize, especially during the pandemic, many of the challenges that our agency faced. So wanted to just lift that up and just say that just continue partnership, continue greatness, and looking forward to that partnership.
Absolutely.
And Mr. McCullough, this is, I guess, the last time that we'll see you in this capacity, but just thanking you for your due diligence and commitment to making sure that we're knowledgeable and educated on our agencies that we have in front of us. Colleagues, this was the last respective agency, and that ends our bill hearings or our hearings in reference to public safety, transportation, and environment. Thank you again.
I think it's the last time